Hello, everybody. Today I am experimenting with the idea that I could live stream outdoors. It's a nice day. It's a sunny day, even though I am sitting in the shade. And Leo is here, and so you maybe could see him. And I'm taking a break from mowing the lawn. And what I want to talk about is this TED video, you know those TED videos. Well, I saw one and it was from Israel. It was actually from the Weizmann Institute where uh, my father was a physicist a long time ago. And this woman who was a biologist there was talking about reproductive strategies. And she was talking about how in her generation, and she's much younger than I am, and she has a PhD in biology and all this. In her generation, everybody gets divorced. And I think it kind of may have happened even in my generation because I had like two friends in Israel, um, that I still am sort of in touch with. And both of them apparently got divorced. But in my mother's generation, almost nobody got divorced. So 100% of the people that I know of from my generation got divorced. Of course, I don't really keep in touch with most people. So, anyway, that point that she was making was valid. But there were some other points that seem to, just jump to conclusions with regard to reproductive strategies. And I think a lot of us are confused about this. So, for instance, toward the end, she sounded as if she were against polygamy and against the patriarchy. And she felt that in order for women to have the best possible lives, they should be paid to raise children regardless of whose children they are. And that sounded like a socialist stance, which would have absolutely no consequence for making bad decisions. So, first of all, I'd like to point out that patriarchy is a great way to go if you have unlimited resources for your species and you just want to take over as much land as possible. You want to reproduce and grow your population because women or females are the bottleneck of reproduction. On the other hand, if you're dealing with a population that has not enough resources, then the opposite strategy of polyandry is good because then you're going to limit your reproduction. So that's something that I talked about at Hub Pages. And there's a link down below about this. I think I will take a break now and try to share this on my other channel. and need to also copy the link and share it on Facebook. So I'm going to talk a little bit also about the hormones for sexual selection or mate selection. And so when this woman from the Weissman Institute was talking about reproductive strategies and things that work and our hormones that have to help us maintain, say, pair bonds. And she was talking about oxytocin. And of course, oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It's the thing that helps us to maintain a short-term pair bond for the purpose of raising children. And it's also the hormone that allows mothers to, to be motivated to take care of their children, to love their children, to fall in love with their children. Okay, so that's one of the hormones that we have. But to assume that all falling in love is based on oxytocin doesn't make sense, because actually oxytocin is something that happens. It's a love that grows out. It's a hormone that causes a love that grows out of the relationship. But how do you get into a relationship with someone? Okay, I mean, you become bonded with your baby. You become bonded with a mate that you've already had sex with. Oxytocin comes into being there. But mate selection is not that way at all. So there is, of course, the very pure sexual arousal type stuff that comes from testosterone, and in women it's progesterone and estrogen. But really, when women get very excited, there's some testosterone involved in that too. But and that is what we consider something that we have in common with many other animals, including those that aren't mammals. But if you're talking about the more, shall we say, evolved or at least complex animals, so oxytocin is a little bit more advanced than the strictly reproductive hormones such as testosterone and estrogen. But we do have another one, and that deals with actually selecting a mate, and that has to do with catecholamines. And so if you look at down below in the description box, I have an article called Love and Limerence, and there's a section there about that. And I don't know whether I should risk screen sharing with you so that we can get to these articles, because if I do that, I may never find my way back. But I feel a little bit as if I'm willing to take that risk. So if I were to screen share, I don't know, something has changed here. Now it's wanting to know whether it's the application window I want to share or the other. So I don't know. I'm going to cancel it because I'm not sure what that means. So I don't feel that lucky right now with regard to sharing my window. Okay, so just go down below if you are interested in either the question of whether patriarchy or matriarchy, meaning polygamy versus polyandry is better for purposes of reproduction. You can follow the link that talks about that. Or if you are interested in the various hormones that are involved in falling in love, and not just the ones for pair bonding, then you can read the Love or Limerence article that I have in the description box. But for the time being, I'd just like to go over again what that woman said in her TED Talk that seemed to me a little bit, well, overly simplified. Let's put it that way. So she started to talk about those animals that do pair bond, and most of those are birds. And isn't that interesting? And I do have birds, and I have one pair of birds that are definitely bonded. They love each other a lot. They henpeck each other a lot. They mate. They lay eggs. Unfortunately, they're not very good at taking care of those eggs. So the eggs never hatch, and we don't actually have any babies, which is, that's another issue. So what would happen if those babies were, let's say, if those eggs were put in an incubator or given to a pair of birds that really know how to take care of them? Then those eggs might be able to prosper. Some of them do seem to be fertilized, but they just don't know how to take care of their young. And this brings us also to the question of adoption. Is adoption always wrong? Is it always a bad thing? And why do we call it cuckolding? So there's the cuckoo who lays an egg in another bird's nest. But presumably, if it laid an egg, it must be a female, not a male, right? And so it's a female who is allowing her child to be adopted by a different species. Sometimes that can be very bad because once the baby hatches who doesn't belong there, he might kick out the other babies from the nest. But let's say that doesn't happen. Is it always wrong to adopt? Is the adoption reproductive strategy always wrong? And how does this have, what are the implications of this for exotic animals in the United States, for instance? There's really a push against breeders. There's this implication that if they breed animals and then they hand them out to other people to adopt, that this is somehow a bad thing. Well, the strategy of one male sharing his sperm with another couple isn't always a bad thing and something that the couple doesn't want. And the strategy of a female sharing her egg with a couple isn't always a strategy that is, something that is done stealthily and pushed on that couple. So there are a lot of people with reproductive problems. They will use donor sperm or they will use donor eggs. And it's really important that that be allowed. What you have to understand is under those circumstances, those males, it's okay though. Yeah, as long as you're not lying to people about what's going on, it's okay. And as long as you're not stealing anybody's children, it's okay. And it's a strategy that helps those people who want to raise children to be allowed to raise children, but it also helps those people with the best sperm and egg to have many more progeny than they could afford to raise themselves. Okay? So it's not a bad strategy at all. And it's a very natural one, which works very well under free enterprise if we're allowed to have contracts and agreements about these types of things. Now, there's a movement afoot to make sperm donors responsible for the upkeep of their children. I don't think that's right, because the moment you do that, you're going to get fewer and fewer people to be willing to donate sperm. Because let's face it, the real motivation for donating sperm for a man is the same motivation that he had to sleep with another man's wife. It's to spread his sperm. It's to spread his genetic material without having to provide for those children. If you make that illegal, if you legally sabotage that agreement, then those people will no longer help childless couples. There have been people who have saved their children from death by starvation or death by Nazi camps by allowing other people to adopt their children so the children could survive. In all of those cases, the parents, the genetic parents, were doing the right thing by allowing their children to be adopted. They were thinking about the well-being of their children. So I think that adoption, as long as it's voluntary on the part of the genetic parent, and it's voluntary on the part of the adoptive parents, is a good thing. It happens in nature. It happens in our societies when we are allowed to make contracts with each other about buying and selling our genetic material. And it also happens when exotic breeders or any kind of breeders sell animals that they have bred to people who want to have those animals. So the movement against breeders is the same nasty movement which is going against sperm donors, egg donors, or anybody who facilitates the reproduction of beings. It's not a good idea, because if you divorce the free market from people's choices for reproduction, that's going to create a mess. So anytime somebody tells you that the future is going to be wonderful when people do not have to think about financial matters when they reproduce, that's not going to be good. I do have a third article that explains that socialism only works for eusocial insects because they are very closely related to each other. So think about the bees. Yes, they do have a commune, but did you know that they're all sisters and that this has something to do with it? Okay, I'm going to have to let you go, but just think about these issues and leave a comment below if you have something to say about this.